All right, welcome back. We are on part 2 of our Tools of the Timber Framing video series. So we're not going to cover every single tool that gets used in timber framing. I'm just trying to cover kind of the main ones. I left out a slick, which obviously watch some of the videos in there. There is one in there and it's a wonderful tool. But we're going to start this one with a chain mortiser. Chain mortiser takes place of a boring machine or trying to drill them out by hand or trying to chisel them all out by hand. But keep in mind there still is some finish work that you need to do with the joint if you're going to use a chain mortiser. The great part about a chain mortiser is I can do a really big mortise in about 5 minutes. The bad part about them is if you get an old one used like what I did and you have some things worn out, as you're going to see coming up quickly, it's going to frustrate you, especially this one has frustrated me to no end with a clamping mechanism. But I wouldn't trade this thing for the world. It has saved me hours, if not days of labor on this build. I love this thing, sort of. This is what I'm talking about with this clamping mechanism. This thing is infuriating me. The thing just wandered 1/8 of an inch in that cut. Son of a bitch. But regardless of the frustration, as you just saw in the swearing and the screaming, I didn't throw the machine. It's way too good of a machine to do that. But these things will save you a ton of time. If you have a lot of mortises to cut, I can't even tell you how many mortises are in this building. I should go through and count them up sometime, just for the fun of it. But I tell you, there's a ton of them. So when I say this thing probably saved me days in labor, this thing saved me days in labor. Even with the frustration, you can see in the linkage right there how worn out that is. That rod actually has a really big. It's been ground out by the levers. So moving along to the next tools. I say tools because I have 3 of them that I've used in this build, and that would be your circular saws. Now what I use the 7 1/4 inch regular standard circular saw. That's great for kerfing things out. It's actually really good for kerfing out your deep cuts first. Kind of helps your beam saw blades get through it a little nicer. So we use this one quite often. I did have a comment recently on using power tools. I'm not a purist, folks. I mean, I love doing this thing. I love working on this building. I can't wait for the next timber framing project. I've really fallen in love with this style of building, but using the power tools, I have limited time, so if I was doing this all by hand, we'd still be chiseling away right now, 3 years into it. But with the power tools I've accumulated throughout this process, the next one's going to be much, much faster. As you can see here, I'm kerfing out the bigger stuff with a smaller saw before I follow through with a beam saw. Now I have 2 beam saws. I have the 10 1/4 inch Bigfoot saw, which is a kit that mounts onto a skill saw, the Worm Gear. Skill Saw now has their own version of that called the Sasquatch. Really good, solid built machine. I bought this saw right here for $350 used. You could get the Skill Saw with their 10 1/4 inch head on it. You can get that for about $350 brand new. If you're gonna do it, I definitely would not hesitate. The drawback of the 10 1/4 inch saw is it only cuts 3 7/8 inches deep. That's a problem for me. Now this timber right here, this is a 10 by 16 timber, so that leaves me 2 inches, 2 1/4 inches in the middle that I have to deal with on every single cut. But there again, this still saved me a lot of time. For kerfing out these big scarf joints, stuff like that, it just saved me a lot of time. I know a lot of people suggested a Prezi, they suggested using a chainsaw. I didn't use that because I'm looking for the accuracy and clean cuts. I do have a Prezi, and it just has a lot of tear out when you're using it. I don't care for it, and if I figure I would rather get much closer to the line if I can, because it just saves me a lot of work with the chisel afterwards. But with the limitations of the 10 1/4 inch saw, we finally got a big beam saw. I love this thing. This has become my flagship saw. This is the Skilsaw Super Saw Squats with a 16 and 5/16 inch blade. It's able to do a 6 1/4 inch cut. This thing is just phenomenal. This would have saved me hours upon hours on this frame. I mean, just listen to the way this thing runs. It's slow churning, but it's gear driven. I love this saw. Now that saw, that weighs 30 pounds, that big saw. You can see, now that 10 1/4 inch saw is a pretty good size saw, but you stack that 16 incher up next to it, it kind of dwarfs it. That extra 2 inches of cut makes all the difference, especially when you're dealing with 10 inch timbers, even 8 inch timbers. It just makes all the difference. If I only had to get 2 saws for this build, I'd stick with my 7 1/4 inch one, and I would go with the bigger 16 and 5/16 saw. I probably, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't even buy the 10 1/4 inch saw again. I went with the Skilsaw because the price point compared to the Makita is just phenomenal. Moving along to a very necessary tool. Sorry, stumbled over my words. A router is handy. A router is so handy. Cutting housings, when you have a project where you have to cut hundreds of housings, this tool just makes all the difference. It's nice if you're doing beveled cuts for like a diminished housing. So when you go from 0 to 1 inch in, you can build yourself a sled. You can just make everything, it just works really well. This is just a Porter cable fixed base router. It has a 1/2 inch collet, and it comes with a 1/2 and 1/4 inch collet. This router's probably 25 years old if I had to guess. I got it used, and you guys have seen throughout the videos this thing has been used constantly and consistently. I do recommend spend the money on bits. Don't go buy cheap router bits, because if you're doing them like this, you're cutting hundreds of joints, and I cut well over 100 housings. I know I must have. Get the good bits. I use the Freuds. I know there's some better ones out there. That's what I use because I can buy them locally. That's probably about the best bit I can buy locally. We can see here with the router sled and just a little ingenuity, you can get really accurate stuff really easily using the router. So definitely want to have a router if you're doing this and you're not going all hand tools. Now this isn't really, I don't know if you really consider this a tool, but if you're going to get in any kind of traditional building, this is kind of one of the things that you really want to have kicking around. It is so nice to be able to hold your stock in place, shave it down with your draw knife. A draw knife is a very integral part of any kind of traditional carpentry, especially if you're working anything hand rived, anything like that, or hand riven. Definitely gonna want a you're gonna want a shaving horse. Geez, I can't talk tonight. Just like any other night, huh? But shaving horse is just phenomenal. There's some things, I'm gonna build another one soon. There's some things I would definitely do differently. The fit and finish on this It looks nice, but it can be a lot better. I will stick with the solid 4-inch plank on the bottom. I will stick with the adjustable table, but I will probably move my treadles to being a 2-poster instead of the single up the center. I do like it, but definitely can do better. So anyway, there we have it. If there's any more tools you guys want to see covered, let me know, and I will put links to these down below in the video description. But remember, shop around. You might be able to find a better price than what I can. You guys have a good one.